Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss canceled video games. So, the reasoning for this is, of course, we got a lot of games coming up this year. One of my most anticipated definitely being Ghost of Yotei. And recently I've been thinking, obviously there's tons of games that you always want to get, tons of games that you have to wait for, you save up, you pre-order, whatever, collector's edition, all that stuff. And then there's still a ton of games where you're just like, man, why didn't we get that? Why'd they tell us that? Why'd you show me something if I couldn't have it? And I want to start off with one of the classics, because there's going to be a couple. This won't even be the first one, even within this franchise alone, or this style or company or whatever, however you want to classify it. It's not the only one from this company. And I want to start off with talking about Star Wars 1313, because it's one of the examples, which, once again, not the only one, that we actually got gameplay for. We got a gameplay demo for it at E3. We had a title for it. We saw multiple characters, and it was one of those classic situations where it's like, oh, you can tell this is kind of like a middle of the game type of situation, or some mission that's not the very first part of the game. And it looked amazing graphically. I still remember just seeing that back in the day, being like, this looks really good. This looks like a really nice looking game. I think that's interesting. And then it's like, hey, this is a violent game. Obviously we didn't see a ton of violence, but it was definitely one of those situations where it's like, hey, here's going to be a game without the Jedi, and clearly it's going to be a bounty hunter. It takes place on Coruscant, level 1313. Shout out to the episode of Clone Wars where they actually referenced that like a decade later. But such an interesting thing where it looked like it was going to be super cool, new character at the time, and there was some behind the scenes stuff where it was like, they were going to make it, a bounty hunter game where it was specifically, Boba Fett as the bounty hunter, but then they changed it up to a different character and stuff, and it was like, that's fine. It looked great no matter what. It didn't even have to be an established character. Just the little bit that we saw looked amazing. And then everyone's life was just destroyed because they're like, yeah, we got to cancel it. It's over. It's dead and gone. And that's tragic. I think of that all the time because, of course, I love Star Wars. Star Wars is one of my favorite franchises, and I love Star Wars games. I'd say we have, there's so many Star Wars games, honestly, it's hard for me to say, like, they're, more good than bad. Video game-wise, I think I can say that, but even then, it's like, I'm sure there's a buttload of Star Wars games I'm quite unfamiliar with because it's Star Wars. They got a lot, but most of what I played has been pretty good, and I think that would have been up there. I think that definitely would have been one of the really cool games to have where it's like, hey, this is a new, more mature Star Wars game. I'm sure it would have come out, T for teen. They wouldn't have been like, hey, M for mature. Because I think, even Bounty Hunter with Jango Fett, if I'm not mistaken, is still T for teen. And you can just straight up flamethrower, like, innocent people just because in that game. Like, if you want to, you can just kill everybody. But it's like, T for teen. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it's still T for teen. But Star Wars 1313 will always be one of those things where it's like, man, that was something fans were looking forward to, especially as Star Wars fans. I can't really remember the era, but I do believe that was, I think that would have been the next game after Force Unleashed 2, if I'm not mistaken. Like that would have probably, quite a bit after that, actually. Like, they didn't do a third game, and we'll talk about that as well. But I think that would have been like the first real next gen experience would have been Star Wars 1313, and it looked great. Obviously they had actual gameplay. I think that was during the era where it was kind of before you started to see a ton of games pop up that just never really existed, or it was just like, yeah, here's the thing, and then it just never happens, like, in literally any way, shape, or form. I think it was before that era, and definitely a game where you actually see gameplay. It was so rare. I think it's a lot more common now, but it was so rare back then for something to come out and be like, hey, here's straight up gameplay and everything, and then it still gets canceled. Normally, a lot of games are just like kind of behind the scenes stuff. Like, yeah, they were going to do this, and then they just stopped production. It's not like they went all the way to the point of making a demo to show off at E3 or whatever, and then it's canceled. It's like, no, it's, yeah, we were going to do it. We had plans and scripts and stuff, but we never got to that phase. It's still, even now, it's kind of rare to see it get that far. But I feel like there's definitely an era where that was starting to happen. I think it was kind of in that phase of games, unfortunately, where that was happening. And another one that is just like that is Scalebound. Scalebound, I think, is probably the craziest example we have of a canceled game where it was going to happen. I don't remember why they canceled that. I forgot the exact details, but that game had a full-on, like, it had a big trailer, and it was like, hey, it's going to be this giant crazy RPG fantasy game from Platinum Games. And it's like, this is weird. And I remember seeing previews for the game and people talking about, playing the demo in co-op and 4 players, and it's like, yeah, when you get into combat, that's when he puts the headphones on, and that's when the music really kicks in, and outside of that, it's a different type of music. Like, I remember people having details and thoughts and opinions of how kind of some of the crazier things of Platinum Games are actually implemented into an RPG game, and how the combat was, and all the things that you can do, and all this special spots where you can hit the enemies, all this stuff. And it was just like, poof, it's gone. Tons of previews and stuff, like so much information on that game, and then they canceled it, and it's just dead and gone. And I don't think it's ever coming back. I don't know if, even if somehow it did, it would have to be a brand new game, especially because it was Platinum Games. And at this point, if you're not really falling into like details of companies and all that stuff, Platinum Games basically has none of the people it used to have. Like, it doesn't have the original guard of people that literally started that company. Everybody's gone. And I still hope Platinum Games does amazing Platinum Games stuff. Obviously, we'll see how things fare when Ninja Gaiden 4 comes out. That's like their next big thing, where with them in conjunction with Team Ninja. So of course, I'm hoping that succeeds. I have no idea what the future of Bayonetta is, where you have not only so many people left, but still just dealing with Nintendo. Shout out to Bayonetta, by the way. It's the 15th anniversary of the first game, for anyone that didn't know that. And that's about all the merch you'll ever see in your life, because Bayonetta rarely gets merch, and I don't think Bayonetta 2 or 3 are ever getting anything in Celebration, because Nintendo just hardly supports that franchise. They saved it, thank you Nintendo, but like, that franchise is barely recognized. But I'm happy it exists. I'm happy we at least got 3 games, and then 4, kind of in the spinoff, but 3 main titles and the spinoffs. Like, I'm glad we at least got that, but man, I wish we got more merch. But you can check out a whole video on that, where I talk about franchises that need more merch. But Scalebound, that was a heck of a thing to have, where it's like, this is crazy. And I was excited because, Bayonetta, I love Platinum Games, and just seeing the weird combination of, Platinum Games doing things and blending that in with a fantasy RPG, it was crazy. It was like such an odd idea, but it's like, I'm super excited. Saw a bunch of gameplay, saw a bunch of previews for it. Very excited. And then it dies. It's like, wow, that was a lot of content to show people and let people play hands-on, for that to just disappear like that. It was absolutely crazy. So definitely one of the big ones. Scalebound, like I said, up there with 1313, where it's like, we got a full-on, like I said, 1313 had like a slice. Scalebound had like a crazy demo from what I remember. Even when it was first shown, I felt like they had a ton of footage of that game when it first got revealed. And like I said, they had like full demos where people were playing in 4-player co-op, going up to boss battles and doing all of that stuff. And you can find all these old videos, they're still on YouTube. But it's just crazy to think about having straight up memories of people talking about their thoughts and feelings of getting a hands-on demo and it being 4 players and all that stuff. I remember those details, and then the game's just gone. And it's very unfortunate. But moving from just the absolute devastation of, here's a game with gameplay, with dialogue, with giant demos and previews and all that stuff, down to that tier right underneath it, to games that are just in franchises. And because somebody screwed up, we don't have to say who, but we know who in this very first case. The game just never seemed to happen. And I want to start with Dead Space 4. Dead Space 4. Now, I've mentioned time and time again, I hate EA for everything that they have done. Killed Dead Space, one of my favorite franchises on earth. Love a great horror game, and Dead Space is fantastic for at least the first 2. And Dead Space 3 is still pretty fun. It's great in the first part of that game. I was super worried. I remember all the early reviews and stuff, and it's like, oh, it's not really that great, and people freaking out. And granted, I still remember that E3 demo as well, where they decided, here's the section we're going to show off for co-op, and it's when you have to fight a giant drill. People made jokes about it, appropriately so, because they should have shown a different part of that game, where it was like, hey, here's a co-op game that is still kind of scary, and it has its moments. Like I said, in the very beginning, when you get to choose the different ships you can go to, absolutely amazing. The drill segment, not as amazing. It's not the worst thing ever. It was just a weird thing to show off where it's like, oh, you have to hit this drill and put it in slow motion to destroy the mechanics of it, and then, fight the xenomorphs as they're necromorphs. I'm sorry, every once in a while I do that, but fight the necromorphs as they're coming at you. And it's like, when you're actually playing it, it's not that bad of a segment. It's an intense moment where this drill's going crazy and it can like splat you and stuff. But it's like, yeah, that was a weird segment to show as like the co-op experience when they could have chosen so many other parts of that game. But I remember the previews. I remember it being compared to Lost Planet, which was super funny because it was just a snowy game with monsters. And I remember that being funny back in the day. But playing the game, that first chunk was like, this feels like classic Dead Space. Like, we're up on these ships and stuff, and you pick where you want to go, and like, this feels good. This feels like classic Dead Space. I love this. And then things sadly changed. And that was, of course, EA messing with it. And then EA was like, hey, all these horrible ideas that we forced you to put into the game really did make the game sell for $18.5 billion, because you know how EA is. Even back then, they were like, it's got to make a kajillion bucks. And so, of course, they killed it. And then they brought it back. And then they killed it again. And, that's a whole other thing. But that first time they killed it, we were going to have Dead Space 4. And I think, obviously, as it has been clearly noted, if you look into it, Dead Space 3 itself could have been even better had they not forced them to do so many things. Like, even the co-op thing actually has some pretty decent merit for how they were doing the story, and it kind of worked with what they kind of had to do. But it made sense. It was like, okay, well, you get to a certain point in the story where the main character of the franchise has kind of done it all. He's gone crazy. He's fixed going crazy. All those good things. And then it's like, well, let's have another character that's at the beginning of that phase. And then you have to deal with the different sides of that coin. That was actually a really good concept. I love that being implemented. I thought it was really nice. I'm kind of so-so about some of that stuff having to be there only co-op wise, because it means you do have to play with somebody else to see that stuff. But great idea, especially when you get to do it and it's fun. But Dead Space 4 being canceled really, really sucks, because there's, once again, that's when you get to that level of like, yeah, we never made it, but here's the ideas, here's like some script concepts and things like that. And especially with the DLC for Dead Space 3, where it was like, holy crap, this is what we wanted. Like, it feels good. Like, it's great. Like, it seems like we're getting back to what we want. And then, it going back to Earth, which was crazy, and just, it seemed like it literally had to be the final game. And then they were just like, yeah, but 3 didn't make a lot of money, so let's just kill off what is most likely going to be the final game of the franchise. Let's just stop it here. Like, And that really sucks. As a huge Dead Space fan, I'm heartbroken by that, especially now, because there was seemingly hope on the horizon with them bringing Dead Space back, and it being, of course, like the literal perfect remake. The game is absolutely phenomenal, but once again, EA somehow is just like, that wasn't $8 billion. That it just isn't worth it. It's like, what in the world did you? How did you even bother bringing it back just to cancel it with massive reviews and stuff? Like, it's just crazy some of the things that they seem to do at EA, but. Dead Space 4, 100% will always be one of those things where we knew it was being worked on, the concept of it was out there, the ideas, and like some script things were done because they kind of knew where they were headed, and it just said, nah, it's over. And that's always gonna suck, because it's like, this is horrible. And especially now with them having killed the franchise 2 times, still crazy, it just goes right back to, yeah, that's just where we are. It seems like it just will not happen. And that effing blows. And I will hate EA forever for that, because they're crazy. Why they even bring it back just to do that after 1 game? Still nuts. I'm going to say it every chance I get. But another canceled game that had some ideas, that was in a franchise that sadly, overlord hands got into it and corrupted it and said, make this kind of quick. Let's put this out real fast. Let's just get it done, because we know what we got. It's a franchise people like. Let's just put it out there. We're gonna do numbers guaranteed. Just hurry up. The Force Unleashed 3. I really wanted that game so bad. I really wanted Force Unleashed 2 so bad, because let's be honest, that game, you can almost consider that like half canceled, considering how forced they were into just pumping that game out at the last second and being like, yeah, we're not giving you any extra time. Just make it and be done with it. And it really sucks that happened just to Force Unleashed 2, because that game could have been amazing as well. But they, of course, had ideas. There were things they wanted to do for Force Unleashed 3, and we will never see the end of that. man, it would be like almost an insane dream just to even see that get a revival. If they did, kind of a Dead Space thing where they rebooted the whole franchise. I don't know, at this point, especially with it being under Disney and stuff, that it really won't ever happen. It is like almost straight up impossible to ever expect anything to be done with that game ever again, sadly. But even if it got remade, it would be a full-on remake. Like, they would change the story and canon of that because it would not be, what it was in the original. So even if it came back and then they did a redone version of 2 and then we got a 3, it would be a completely alternate timeline because they'd make it where it has to be within canon, and they would totally have to tone down a lot of stuff that happens in there. But it's always been the dream, like, hey, get Starkiller in canon and tone them down if you have to. I mean, it's been what, a decade and a half at this point, at least for the first game, and honestly probably been a decade for the second because I think they came out only a couple years apart. But sadly, Force Unleashed 3 is just one of those things where it's like, man, we wanted that game really bad. The first game is really great. The second game is certainly fun to play. It's really good, but it's definitely the story is the worst part of that entire second game, where it's like they just got rushed into it. Biggest question of the whole game, you just have the exact same question at the end of the game, like, well, is it really him or is it a clone of him? Who knows? So what do you mean, who knows? That was the whole point. The first trailer was like, there's a million Starkillers, what's going on? Like, the whole point of that game was, you can't clone a Jedi, or can you? And then the end of the game was still, did he clone you? I don't know. That's great. That's fantastic. But sadly, Force Unleashed 3 did not happen. And sadly, it never will happen. And that really blows because it would have been great, I'm sure, especially with the way that game ends. If you don't know how Force Unleashed 2 ends, if you're one of those people who doesn't care, if you know something's canceled, I would say just play it. It's still worth playing both those games because they're just absolutely insane and fun, over-the-top power trips. Also, shout out to the Euphoria engine. I will never forget you. Underutilized, I'm telling you. They used it in Force Unleashed, and they used it in Grand Theft Auto 4. And that's why GTA 4 has the best physics. Euphoria engine. I will always miss it. But to move on to just another layer down for like the final game. The final game I want to bring up, there's tons of canceled games. So like I said, want to know your, I can't say favorite canceled games, but the things you wish we saw the most, definitely. But moving down to like this final itty bitty bottom phase where things are said, where there's ideas and stuff like that. And you're going to see that these two games, there's 2 more games. They're in very different states, but I feel like they're in the same state, and I'll explain why. And the first game I want to reference, and there's not much to even reference, is the game Agent. I don't know if any of you guys remember Agent randomly popping up, but it was a PS3 thing. It was one of those early days where, once again, it was like, here's just like an idea of something, a concept. Like, you think it's gameplay. It was during that era, it was the PS3, so it was like, is this real? Is this Killzone 2? It is definitely not Killzone 2, but it looked cool. That was not Killzone 2 though. But Agent, same thing. Here's a cool trailer. Here's some, fake crosshairs and stuff where we make it look like the camera's behind the character, but none of this is gameplay in any way, shape, or form. I'd have to go back to see if there was actual gameplay at all, but I think it was all 100% CG, but it was one of those trailers where they make it look like it was gameplay. But Agent, there's nothing to it. That's it, just a name. I think that's one of those weird things where even now, like a decade later, they haven't officially canceled it or something weird like that. But just look into that, Agent. That's all there is to really say about it, because that's all there really is. It's that one trailer, and it was like, oh, that should be cool, and then it never came out. And then the other thing, which is on a different level technically, but it just feels the same way. Beyond Good and Evil 2. We had that first trailer come out a decade ago, if not more. Actual characters, holy crap, is coming back. I never played the first one. I never ended up getting attached in any form, so I'm kind of fine as far as this game never existing, because I never got into the first one. But they had that trailer, they had the characters. Holy crap, it's happening. Nothing for an eternity. And then, holy crap, Beyond Good and Evil 2. With completely different characters that didn't exist in the original game. It's totally different. Now it's this crazy open world thing, monkey with the crazy robot arm, all this stuff. You can fly out, all the way out, no loading screens, all these things that I don't think are possible or even real, if I'm being totally honest. And now, Beyond Good and Evil 2. And that's it. That's all there really is to say. And that's why I feel like, even though we've technically even seen gameplay of it, where it's like this crazy open world situation, that was also maybe in the middle of the last generation of games, and we're in the middle of this generation. As crazy as it is, I know that's where we are though. It's been like 5 years. So I don't know. Beyond Good and Evil 2. I still see it in the same light just because of how absolutely insane it has been. I just don't know. They say it's happening. It's not, technically speaking. I know it's not canceled. And like I said, the agent thing I think might be a little weird too. But I know they say that. But this is one of those situations where, as of now, it's just absolutely insane. So I'm putting it in here, even though technically speaking, they are always saying, hey, it's not canceled. It's totally coming out. We're doing stuff. We're working on it. It's somewhere in the ether. It's still coming out, they say. But I'm putting it in here because I do believe it beat the record for Duke Nukem Forever at this point. So it deserves the spot. Even though technically it's not canceled, we're going with Beyond Good and Evil 2. But that's where I'm going to end things. Although, I want to say this. Shout out to that Spider-Man game that was multiplayer that sadly got canceled. And shout out to Last of Us Factions. Both of those also being live service games. It sucks, but at the same time, I'm kind of okay with it. Because they would have to do so much stuff that it would take away from like the single player stuff that we like from those companies. I'm okay with it. It sucks, especially because that Spider-Man one actually had a straight up trailer and voice lines and all that. And plus costumes. But they can just throw those costumes into 3 and I'll be fine. Just had to give a shout out to those. But yeah, Beyond Good and Evil 3 I'm counting as my last official final canceled game, even though it's technically not canceled and it's a straight up mystery, and we will see if it ever really happens. But I would love to know what games are out there that sadly are not out there for us to play. So please, in the comments, let me know what games got canceled that are just like heartbreaking. You guys miss Milo? Remember that game on the Kinect, which was never real in any way, shape, or form? You guys wanted that? Did that get, quote unquote canceled and it made you sad? Crazy times. But let me know what canceled games are out there that you just wish we finally had, whether it's a sequel that never got made, a game like, Scalebound or something where it was going to be the beginning of something new, anything. Many of the other Star Wars things, because I didn't mention that other Darth Maul game, wanted that as well. That one hurts, for sure. But let me know what canceled games are out there that you just wish we got. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.